What's up, Tailgaters? You're in the booth with Tailgate Nate today. Welcome to my channel and welcome to Week 2 predictions. Our first top 10 matchup of the college football season features two teams that made the college football playoff a season ago. It's the reigning, defending national champions, the Michigan Wolverines, that get a big test at home when the number 3 ranked Texas Longhorns come to town. Again, first top 10 matchup. Really excited for this one, and we're going to talk about everything Longhorns and Wolverines here in just a little bit. But before we do that, you guys know I have to say thank you for all the love and support you have continued to show this channel, whether that was over prediction season as we get into the college football season. I really appreciate everything that you guys have done, and please continue to support the channel any way you can. If you're as big of a college football nerd as I am, you have to hit the subscribe button. You have to ring the bell so you know when I upload literally anything. And if anything piques your interest, go for it and watch it. And speaking of which, thank you for taking time out of your day to watch this video. It really does help support my channel in more ways than you can even imagine. And if you would like to continue to support what I do here on YouTube, please like, comment, share, do anything else you can. Help support the channel. It really does mean a lot to me. And hey, if you want to know a little bit more about me and my journey to be a sports media professional, what I do here on campus as a sports media student, and literally anything else to go along with content creation, any podcast, and anything else I do outside of YouTube, as well as updates on YouTube, go give me a follow on Twitter or X, whatever you'd like to call it. It's at TailgateNate29, capital T, capital N, and you can find everything that I do there. So I would really appreciate it if you gave me a follow, and you can keep along with my journey, again, as a sports media student. But hey, with all of that being said and done, let's dive on in. Week 2 predictions are here, and it's time to talk about the Longhorns and Wolverines. In case you haven't been on my channel before, this is how we do predictions around here. We're going to go through keys to the game when each team possesses the football. So first, we'll take a look at the Texas offense versus the Wolverines defense, and then we'll flip it. We'll take a look at the Wolverines offense versus the Longhorns defense, and at the end of the video, I'll sort of wrap it up, give some final thoughts, and then I'll give you my official prediction for what I think is going to happen for this absolutely thrilling contest in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Let's go ahead and dive right on into it and show you what happens when Texas has the football. Apologies for that. I don't know why the Texas logo wasn't popping up on screen. It's up there now. Thankfully, it's right over there. We're all good. But let's tell you what Texas did against Colorado State last week. Again, all the stats you're seeing are the stats from the team's contest this past week. So obviously these are Texas's stats from Colorado State offensively and Michigan's defensive stats from the game against Fresno State. So let's talk about the Texas offense first, because I'm just going to lead into my first point right now, guys. The spotlight is all going to be on Quinn Ewers and company. You remember the last couple times that Quinn Ewers has played in a really, really big non-conference game? Well, it's been the past couple years against Bama, and the spotlight was on him, that road game in Tuscaloosa last year, and look, they have an opportunity to get yet another really big road win against a top 10 team in the country for the second straight year, and Quinn Ewers is going to have that spotlight. You look at what he did last week, 260 yards, 3 touchdowns, did have 1 pick in there, but not too big of an issue there on that. Ryan Wingo, Isaiah Bond, Jonte Cook, Matthew Golden, who had 2 touchdowns, by the way, all got involved in this receiving effort, as well as many other players that I didn't mention there as well. Running the football as well, so talking about the company, again, I mentioned his wide receiver room. Jadon Blue was really good. Jarrett Gibson had 10 carries for 67 yards, 1 touchdown. This is a team that got over 500 yards per game, that had 7.4 yards per play, didn't allow a sack, was 50% on third downs. The offense was clicking on all cylinders in that game against Colorado State, but they are going to get a really, really good test. Now, the Michigan secondary did not play particularly well against Fresno State. They let Mikey Keene pretty much do not necessarily whatever he wanted, but Mikey Keene was very, very effective for the Bulldogs in that game. 235 yards, 1 touchdown, did have 2 picks, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, but this is a Michigan defense that, look, had the best rush defense in college football last year, and that has continued to be the case into this season as well. They only allowed 9 rush yards in that game against Fresno State. Again, the secondary did not play particularly well, but that defensive front was absolutely fantastic, and that really is another big key that I'm looking forward to in this game. The battle at the line, I think, is going to be very telling, because you had this Texas offensive front that didn't allow any sacks, while the Michigan defensive front got 3 of them against Mikey Keene last week. It was an offensive front in Texas that opened up this run game and allowed them to, I'll get the stat here for you in a moment. I'm go ahead and looking at yards per carry. 4.6 yards per carry for the Texas rushing attack last week, which again is not super spectacular, but is good enough to help grind away a defensive front, to help grind away a defense. And it's a Texas offensive front, guys, that was just really impressive, played it really well. But again, this is the Michigan defensive front that defended the run exceptionally well last year. That's a pattern that looks like it's going to continue into this season. They didn't allow much on third down. Again, they got 3 sacks. So this physicality battle up front, the Texas offensive line versus the Michigan defensive front 6, front 7, or just the defensive front in general, is going to be very, very interesting. Michigan is going to need some of its better defensive players here, I think, to step up, be able to get pressure into that backfield, be able to slow guys like Jaden Blue down, be able to slow some of those other names in that Texas defensive backfield down. And I mean, when you take a look at some of the Michigan defensive players that are going to do that, well, Josiah Stewart was a huge part to that defensive effort last week. He came up with 2 of the 3 sacks. The other guy that had a sack was Rayshawn Benny. He's going to need to be a big piece there as well. Ernest Hausman might have to step it up. Mason Graham is there as well. It's a Michigan defensive front and the defensive line and the linebacker room that is very, very talented. It's got to be able to get pressure through this Texas offensive front. But I talked about the Michigan secondary, how it just hasn't played too well. It has to be a difference maker here. They allowed 235 yards last week. Again, Mikey Keene had himself a fairly good day, 22 of 36, 235 yards, 6.5 yards per pass. I mean, yeah, the Michigan secondary still did do its fair share of parts, right? But it overall just needs to take it a step up. It did save them in that game against Fresno State. Will Johnson had the pick 6 that was able to seal the game last week if the game already wasn't sealed. They forced 2 turnovers last week, but this Michigan secondary is going to get a much, much, much bigger test, and no matter who plays quarterback for Michigan, Quinn Ewers will be able to outbattle them and beat them out. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Texas has a ton of really, really good wide receivers that you're going to see play in this game that are going to have a huge impact here in this game. And for the Michigan Wolverines secondary, it's got to step up big time. It was good throughout some parts. It was mostly just kind of throughout that game against Fresno State. Step up, make a plays, force some mistakes, maybe even force a couple picks like you did last weekend against Mikey Keene and Fresno State. However, this is the Texas offense that is going to be much tougher to slow down. They are a much better and just insanely different animal than what the Wolverine defense played last week. But when you go ahead and switch gears now and you want to talk about this Wolverine offense, well, everything that I kind of said in the preseason just kind of was confirmed here in this game. I wasn't in love with the Michigan quarterback room. I thought the wide receiver room, though, was still underrated, and I thought it was going to be pretty solid. It did not turn out that way. Now, we know the Michigan defense is still fantastic, and we know this Michigan run game is still going to find it. 148 rush yards last week, and they really didn't utilize Donovan Edwards that much. It was mainly Kalel Mullings that had himself a pretty good day last week, but the quarterback play and the wide receiver play need to improve tenfold. Why? Well, if you want to go win another national championship this season, it's going to be as hard to do it as ever this year. One, because of the expanded playoff field, you're going to have to play tough team after tough team if Michigan makes it to the college football playoff. Secondly, I mean, just let's go back to last week. I was not too impressed with either Davis Warren or Alex Orji at the quarterback position. Again, I think the rushing attack is going to be fine. We know Colston Loveland at the tight end position. He's going to have his moments and play really well just as he did last week. But the wide receiver room has got to step up. Guys like Kendrick Bell, Samaj Morgan, Tyler Morris. There are only 5 different receivers that caught a pass from Michigan this past week. And if you exclude Loveland and Donovan Edwards, who did have a touchdown but didn't even have any yards to show for it, had a net gain of 0 receiving yards in that pass game and 2 catches. I mean, again, those 3 guys I just mentioned, Morris, Bell, and Morgan, were the only 3 guys that caught a pass for Michigan. That has to get better. That has to improve because, again, this is the Texas defense. You take a look at that number. 74 yards allowed last week through the air against Colorado State. And look, guys, that is a really good Colorado State passing attack. They have one of the better wide receivers in the Mountain West, and Torrey Horton. Braden Fowler-Nicolosi is a really good quarterback, and Colorado State has a good offensive system that Texas was able to shut down. Now, physicality on the line on both sides will be tested because while, yes, Michigan only allowed 1 sack, the rush game for Michigan overall was able to get 4.4 yards per carry. And look, Donovan Edwards assuredly is going to have a much better game in this one than he did in that previous game against Fresno State. They're going to be able to use Kalel Mullings in this one as well, but Donovan Edwards is going to step up. He is going to play better. But this is a Michigan offensive front that's going to have, I think, a really tough time getting some push on this Texas defensive front because I think the Longhorns are really, really good. Now, overall, 118 rushing yards allowed last week. And again, I'll get you the yards per carry here in just a minute. I think it was around 3.5. 3.7 yards per carry on the ground for the Colorado State offense this past week. And when you go ahead and take a look at some of the forces on this Texas defense that were able to make it as good as it was, well, Golobo was really good. Anthony Hill Jr. was really, really good. The guy that ended up getting the sack for them this past week, I'll go and check. I don't believe they might have had a sack. 1 second, I'll fact check that. All right, there you go. So what had happened was I ended up switching the two numbers. So Texas did allow 1 sack this past week, but they did not generate a sack last week against Colorado State. So my apologies for that mix-up. But again, the Texas defensive front looked pretty solid. I mean, again, the rush defense, for as well as the secondary played, the rush defense definitely could have played a little bit better. And again, they need to get more pressure back to the quarterback position, which when you play Michigan is not necessarily going to be the biggest point of emphasis. Yes, when Davis Warner, Alex Orji drop back to pass, you're going to want to get pressure. But it's slowing down this run game and being able to push through this Michigan offensive front that is still really, really good this season. That is the big point here. Texas has a lot of dudes on that defensive front still that are going to be able to provide pressure. The Michigan offensive front did well to contain it last week against Fresno State. Again, much bigger beast when you have to play the Texas Longhorns. But the Texas DBs, I think leading into my prediction here, are going to be the difference in this game for a couple of reasons. One, the Michigan passing attack just was not great this past week, and I don't think it's going to step up well enough here in this game, especially against the Texas defensive backfield that did what it did last week. I don't think the Michigan offense is going to have enough in the tank to be able to do that. And look, as we sort of dive on into my prediction here, you can find this one. It's the big noon kickoff game on Fox. Texas has the 7.5-point favorite right now. The Michigan offense, I think, is going to have a couple moments here. I do think the run game is going to have some moments where it's going to be able to rip off some chunk yardage plays. But again, I don't love this quarterback room for Michigan. This wide receiver room is just kind of sitting there looking at me, and I'm just kind of saying, It left me uninspired, unimpressed after that first week. And while it definitely can improve, I'm going to go with the team that has the much, much better quarterback here in Quinn Ewers. I think it's the team that has the better, more well-rounded offense. I think it, especially with the way the Michigan defensive backfield played, I think the Texas defensive backfield will be much more capable and much more able of slowing down whatever Michigan is going to be able to throw at them. Your first top 10 battle of the season, I think, is a fairly lopsided one. I got Texas by 2 touchdowns. Again, Quinn Ewers, I think, is going to show out. He did it last year against Alabama in Tuscaloosa. And sure, maybe Michigan scores a little bit more points, but against the Texas defense that played really, really well last week, I don't think Michigan's going to be able to get much offensively. I think Texas wins this one by 2 scores, and the Longhorns will cement themselves as a top 4 team in college football, and leaving Michigan a lot of questions to answer. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Remember to play hard but tailgate harder, and I'll see all you guys in the next video. Goodbye.